And hi everyone, and sorry about this little delay. We're still like prepping, but thank you so much for joining us in our next Rooflessing Colloquium. And what we are gonna do, we're gonna talk, we're very excited. It's a color that we love a lot, yellow ochre. And we're just gonna jump right in. We're gonna talk about how to make it, what's the opposite, and try to come up or define or present a list of colors that we found in different apps. And by the way, I think I should mention those apps, but I don't know them because I'm using the laptop, I mean the iPhone. But hi, Jen, how are you?
Hi, I'm great. Happy to be here.
Thanks. Your notes are incredible and amazing. You are doing an incredible job. And we were just sharing the video with someone the other day, and I feel like um, with your notes, you can actually watch the webinars and then follow the notes and give you a really, really good experience. So thanks so much for doing this.
Aw, it's my pleasure. I'm happy to do them. It's good, like harkening back to high school. It's great. I mean that in the best way. It sounds
Okay.
really and pejorative, but I do not mean that at all. I mean it in a I can use my organizational skills finally.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, so let's just go right in. This is what we're gonna use. And we found another, I don't have the name, but I'll share with you. We found an app that tells you how to mix colors. You just upload an image, a painting, the app recognizes the color, and then you input the brand of paint, and it just tells you the amount of colors that you have to put. It's really amazing. So we're just gonna add this little layer on the presentation. And of course, this had to happen, so it's very timely, and I don't know why, but all right. So the yellow ochre, it's a color that we use in every single palette. It's a staple color. We have, and maybe Jen, you can help me, but we have done a session with yellow ochre last year. We all dressed in yellow ochre and we went to trails, and that was amazing. Yellow ochre is one of the oldest colors. There paintings in caves done hundreds of thousands years ago, years ago. I don't know if that made any grammatical sense, but anyhow, so it's one of the oldest colors, and yeah, we still use it today, and it's one of our basic neutrals. We organize the neutrals from darker to lighter. Um, Raw umber, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, and ecru. Last week we talked about ecru, but yellow ochre is a color that we don't use as much. So one of the things that we assess when we use the tubes is find out what are the colors that we buy the most and also the ones that go out the first. So naturally white is one of the colors that we use the most, but yellow ochre is not a color that that it's very common or that we use a lot. So even though it's a staple color, it just depends on the painting, but it's a very important color to mix with others. It's a warm neutral, so and it's lighter, it has a lot of white in it, so it could be an excellent color for a lot of things. And I don't remember, Jen, you can help me with that, but I think yellow ochre is one of the Zorn palette colors. Either you or Dina will know, but
I know, I was gonna say Dina will know. But yeah, I feel like that sounds right. Dina, if you're in the house, give us a chat. But yeah, I think that's right. I'll double.
um, yeah, anyhow, so I'm just gonna go right ahead, and what I'll do is first, with a little bit of the turpentine, I'll just pinch the color, and I'll just give you an idea of what the color looks like spread. So paint has a certain transparency, so it's always good to spread if you want to identify the color. A color like yellow ochre is great because since it has so much white, it's easily identifiable. I have two blacks right here, and uh, with the naked eye, you cannot distinguish which one is colder or warmer. But with yellow ochre, it's easy to distinguish. And yes, thanks, Dina. So what I'm gonna do before I do tints, tones, and shades, I'm gonna mix primary colors and give you the option to create yellow ochre if you don't have it. We can always create any color in a palette based on the primaries. And it's a good idea to understand or to explore the taxonomy. I just learned that word reading a book of the color by understanding what other colors make it. So to make yellow ochre, here we have cadmium yellow light. I believe you could do this with any um, cadmium yellow, but the formula requires cadmium yellow light, and then this is cadmium red medium. We didn't have cadmium. We don't have cadmium red light, but we feel like we could do. Oh, that's a lot. So the first thing that you do is mix those two colors, and that's going to give you an orange tone. So the next color that you introduce, I'm just going to bring a little bit of the Van Dyke brown. You have to darken that orange in order to create a yellow ochre tone. So right now I have something that's a little bit darker than the yellow ochre. So in order to lighten it up, I'm just going to bring a little bit more yellow. And notice that it's very, very easy to create a yellow ochre if you don't have it. The important thing, you can always change the ratio of paint, but the important thing and what I love about starting the presentation with this, which is something new that we introduced, is the fact that you can create a yellow ochre or any color based on primary tones. So cadmium yellow light, the actual formula is cadmium yellow light, cadmium red light, and then black. So what we used is cadmium yellow light. We didn't have cadmium red light, so we used cadmium red medium. And yet then we use Van Dyke brown as a black, just because it has a warmth. I believe you can do these with any of the cadmium yellows and any of the blacks. Paints gray, paints gray, it's a little bit tricky because it has blue in it. So I think this would be a little bit greener. This one is Mars Black, and we're going to use it for the shades. But yeah, so that's the first thing we wanted to do, to match a yellow ochre color with primary tones. And the next thing that we're going to do, oh, by the way, names that we found that are similar to yellow ochre. Every brand, I think that yellow ochre, and Jen, you can help me with this. The yellow ochre pigment, it's PY63. I don't remember. I should have made a note. Last night, I just went to bed at. This is something that it's just gonna be used by probably the FBI when they look at my files in the from the future. I woke up at 3 a.m. because I went to bed at 9, and then I just spent like close to 2 hours just finding out things about yellow ochre. That was my evening. And of course, I didn't save anything because I was in bed, and I didn't make any notes. And I don't remember, but I think it's PY63.
It's PY43.
PY43. So thanks. So
Uh-huh.
PY43, it depends on where it's mined because it's a mineral color. You're going to have different shades of yellow ochre. And in fact, there are different brands that call this name or this paint or this pigment, no, paint, I should say, different names. So some of the names that are similar to ochre is mustard brown, orange, golden brown, and caramel. So all these names could be related, analogous, applied to, or similar to yellow ochre. Again, mustard brown, dirty orange, golden brown, and caramel. We like to associate paint and color with color names because it just expands our idea of what this color could be used for. So yeah, so I think I forgot the name of the Italian Renaissance painter who created a book, manual for painters. Cennini, I think something Cennini, Cecini, that talks about the usage of yellow ochre. And one of the things that he mentions is fabric, landscapes and fabric. I guess at the time that was a very popular color. So I also found out that we talked about it, I think, when we did the cup of tea. Francisco Zurbarán, the Spanish, uh, what's the movement? It's not Renaissance, but I'll find out. It's not Gothic, but yeah, anyhow. So the Spanish painter from the 17th century who did that beautiful painting of a cup of water with a rose has a painting of a monk painting Jesus Christ from life. An incredible painting. And Jen, I'm adding it to your monumental pile of things to do, but it's a painting by Francisco de Zurbarán, and it's a monk painting Jesus Christ, and he's painting Jesus Christ from life, it looks. And he's holding a palette of colors, and they're all brown. There's no blue, and red and brown. It's very similar to Zorn palette. And I forgot last night at 3 a.m. to just find out the information about that. But yeah, so Cennini, fabrics and landscapes, and also a very popular paint throughout art history. And what I'll do right now is I'm just going to bring some white and I'll start doing some tints. I'm sorry, yeah, tints. So I'll just do a scale. I'm not gonna spend too much time because I just want to jump to the critique part. And but I'll do a scale with just a few, maybe the final one right here. So I'm doing a tint. A tint is when you mix a color with white. I'm using titanium white. And some tint names: sand, camel, champagne, and antique white. So this could be in order of tint intensity. Champagne, I'm sorry, antique white, I think it would be a little bit lighter than this. Champagne, I think probably would be between those two, or maybe this one. Camel color and sand. So I think arranged sand, camel, champagne, and antique white. This could be a beautiful, very fancy way to label the tints that we can create with um, yellow ochre. And those tones can go really well with, they're similar, especially the antique white, similar to ecru in a way, with a little bit more yellow or orange in it. But they could go well for highlights, outdoor lighting, light reflections, things like that. And what I'll do right now, I think I'm just gonna do some notes and I'm sorry, tones. And I don't have gray, so I have to bring some gray for the tones. Oops. So a tone is when you mix a color with gray paint, and this is Portland gray medium. Portland gray medium, which is really neutral gray. And what I'll do right now, I'll just bring some more of the yellow ochre and start doing a few tints. Every time colors are studied or presented in color charts, most fabricators or producers of paint, they create not only an opaque area of color, but they create a transparency, and also they create tints, shades, and tones. So I only made three. This is possibly, it needs a little bit more of this. And in regards of tones, I only found like two reliable names. bronze and coffee. I guess the non-roasted bean of coffee because those are the names that I just found out. This is a very interesting color. It's a very applicable color to many surfaces. So we did a few still lifes, a couple of still lifes, and I use an old iron board with wood, and I use a lot of this tonality to use as a base color, and then I just create variations of that. But when you add gray to a color, you naturally desaturate it and you keep the value low. So I think it's important as well to find out what kind of range you can get with a very saturated color when you bring gray into it. Gray, it's part of our palette. It's a staple color. I haven't seen people add gray on their palettes in any of the classical palettes. I could not live without gray. I think even though we have white and black, I just think it's such a good paint to have on any palette. It's fast, it's quick, it just desaturates and it keeps a very low profile value wise. And finally, what I'll do is I'm just gonna make some shades of yellow ochre, and I'll bring the Mars black. So that's the darkest and most neutral black that we have. And as usual, I just put way too much. So let me just, this will be the end of I need to do the scale from the other end. So black, it's a very powerful color. This is the reason why we don't have it in our palette, because if you don't control it, it could just take over. So rather than put more yellow ochre on this palette, I just, because I know how this works, I just left it alone. I pulled back, and there's no purpose. I could just squeeze half of the tube and it would still be too dark. So this is a good example. We recommend to always, when something gets too dark, always step away from it and start a new test or a new area. I don't even know how this is working, but I'm just gonna bring a little bit more of this. All right, so and I think I need to make a little bit more of a distinction between these three. So notice that I'm not picking up any black from the Mars black because I know that that's too much, and I'm going to mess up. Um, Here we go. So I think I just try to create. So this one, I'm just gonna, I'm just gonna cross it. And just jump over. So what I tried to do is I rectified, I put too much, and I just created the scale based on this and reversed it. And in fact, this could be a good example of why dark tones are dangerous. We call them nuclear for a reason. Just a little bit too much, and then boom, there goes the entire uh, experiment. The alchemy just goes belly up. So what I did is I just picked this up, I put it at the extreme, and then I just worked backwards. So, and in that sense, we only have like two names that we could associate or apply: dark olive and dark lava. So I just feel like those two tones are they're closer to the darker shade of yellow ochre, but I would just feel very comfortable just labeling this maybe also bronze, a different kind of bronze, some metallic name perhaps. But anyhow, so finally, what we're gonna do, so we have made or we created the yellow ochre based on the two primaries that we have right here, and adding a little bit of the Van Dyke brown. We made a tint scale from the yellow ochre to an antique white. We made a tone scale, adding some gray, and we found some bronze or coffee tones, and then finally we did a shade, a scale of shades of yellow ochre, and what we're gonna do, I mean, the opposite, you can just find a very simple color wheel, and the colors in the color wheel are arranged in a circle, and the way to find the complementary is just find the color that's uh, completely opposite in the color wheel. So we found that it's a blue, it's a little bit more intense than this periwinkle that we have, but we don't want to mix this opposite color. We want to find out um, if we can get something gray between these two, and if not, we can just bring maybe a tad of ultramarine blue to make this one a little bit darker. And this is also very important when we study the colors, because by understanding what's the opposite on the color wheel, not only we'll find out how to pull each color back when we create paint. Um, but we also learn about the opposite color temperature, which is very good because, for example, in this case, we would have never realized that on our staple color palette, we actually have a lot of color opposites. We Last week we talked about this color being the opposite of ecru, and this week because of yellow ochre, well, this is going to be also a very opposite color. This is very good because then our colors in the palette, in our staple palette, I feel like they're not isolated. It's not like we randomly, perhaps we randomly arrange them at the very beginning, but by doing these studies, we understand that there's a dynamic that complements, literally, complements the color that we initially thought it was randomly selected. And we find this really interesting and fascinating and educational and uh, helpful in allowing us to understand how can we use the color in our staple palette to create less saturation, more neutral tones. So let me just stop blabbering, and then I just am going to put a little bit of the yellow ochre, and we're going to see what happens. This is the magic alchemy. Let me see if we can make it fade with the grade of the palette. We may be able, it's getting grayer, so that's a good sign. It's getting grayer, but because this has a lot of white, it's not going to be as neutral as the paper. So I'm slowly adding the color, and I see how this is becoming grayer because of the blue. And I will just maybe add a tiny bit more. And the way I gauge it is by seeing how much yellow my eye reads. So let me just do another experiment. I'm going to clean the brush. Oops. And what I'm going to do, oh, and Jen, if you can find and upload. Also, last night I found that there's a mine in, I think it's in the south of France. There's a yellow ochre mine in the south of France that's close to a little village, and the mine it's a yellow ochre mine, so I think it's closed now to the public, or it's not produced, yellow ochre is not produced there anymore. And but it's interesting because the entire village, all the buildings are painted yellow ochre, and I just died. It's just so gorgeous. It just, I was just couldn't bear. I forgot the name of it, but if you can find it, yeah, it's just gonna make you happy.
Okay.
So what I'm gonna do really briefly, and then we're gonna end the presentation. I'm trying to. I mean, this is beyond ambitious. I should probably not do this, um, but let's just see what happens. So the best way to compare is by adding a true gray and see, I added a little bit of titanium white. The reason is because this is going to be much lighter. Um, And what I'm doing is I'm using this as a way to compare. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to because now it's tilting already towards bluish. So I don't think I'm just going to get that gray, that exact gray. Let me see. I'm not going to give up yet because I feel like I could bring some of the yellow ochre and pull it back. And again, the way I try to match, I read blue and yellow. So I feel if it starts to get a little bit too bluish, I just bring some yellow. I think that's the grayest that I could do it. Whoops. And I'm just gonna put this one right next to it. And possibly, since it's not the exact opposite, possibly what I would need to do is it's pretty good, but I would need to bring maybe a little bit. I'm gonna give it a try. Well, no, let's just leave it like that. I don't want to take too much time. But um, if I were to mess with it and fuss with it rather than mess with it, I would bring a little bit more of an intense blue because again, this is not the exact opposite of yellow ochre. The exact opposite is bluer. It's not ultramarine or cobalt or phthalo. Those are way too pigmented. It's a color that it's a little bit less pigmented blue. And because we don't have it in our staple palette, I just gave it a try with this. I think it's pretty good in the sense of creating a balanced neutral color, and that happens with every single paint that we have. If we are able to place it on the color wheel and then look at the exact opposite of it, and we're able to make or have that color in the opposite side of the color wheel. When you mix them, it will always give you gray. And why is this not only mind-boggling but also good? Because if you have this in mind, you can, even if you're doing a monochromatic palette with yellow ochre, you can always bring the opposite to pull back the pigmentation. So as we know, color from out of the tube, it's highly pigmented and generally we would say always has to be processed. So a good way to process is to just what we call pull back the pigmentation. And in order to do that, you don't dilute it. You can use gray, but if you want to um, keep that pigment and then pull it back in a different way, you just can bring the opposite. So I just think that that's going to be the end of the presentation. Thank you so much. We're going to upload this on our growing tutorial page in our website, rooflesspainters.com/tutorials. We have a ton right now, and and they're all for sale. It's free for you because you signed up on the webinar last week, but we're going to keep doing this and studying color and understanding, bringing some art history, especially with colors like this one. And we'll just see you next week. So I'm going to stop the recording and then we'll just move on to the critique.